Hey everybody, Jay Niblick and Brian Arzani here. Say hey Brian, good morning.
What up, Jay?
Not much. Welcome everybody out there in viewer land or whatever we would call it. So today, as well, let's go back. Obviously, today is a specific topic, but we're always coming to you guys with the 20 till profitability because we give you 20 minutes. Because if you got more than 20 minutes to keep learning about how to make profits in your consulting practice, we already know what the problem is. You spending too much time theorizing. Get your hell out there and do something. So 20 minutes, that's it. Caps, we got a thing going. I got to actually start my timer. Today, if you want to follow more of these things, by the way, then register for the podcasts here on Innernetrix.com. Or if you're watching this elsewhere, go to Innernetrix.com.
We've got a Facebook page, Innermetrics Mastermind. We got Innermetrics North America Facebook. We got all kinds of things. So we're just, like you said, Jay, abundantly giving information out to solopreneurs who are trying to figure out how to, do what they do and, maybe make a living at it.
That's it, Innermetrix.com. Now, we do have a Facebook page. It wasn't doing crap yesterday like the rest of the world, but I think Mark got it back up. I sent him a text earlier this morning and said, hey, Mark, you mind just fixing that shit for us? Innermetrix. It's called
He responds right away, doesn't he?
Yeah. Sometime before I die. It's called Innermetrix for a reason. I chose the name because it was about taking intangibles. We're talking about human capital management, talent consulting, anything to do with human capital. What happens between the ears is our universe. And helping corporations and individuals in those corporations understand how to improve performance and get better. And so anybody that's consulting in the realm of leadership development, coaching, executive planning, development, strategic management even, because you're managing people, the intangibles are all of these soft skills, as they called them, which they were called soft skills because they were intangible. They weren't able to be quantified or enumerated. So we use psychometric instruments to help organizations. The topic of the next 3 or possibly 4 calls is, we'll call it the profile series. We want to look at using psychometrics to turn those intangibles into tangibles because, Brian, as you say, would you say subjectivity? How's that go for you?
The biggest thing that we find that resonates with human resource professionals, leaders, executives, because they're going to bring us all these issues, right? The emotions and this perception issue. And what folks really want to do is be able to take this thing that's very subjective based on perceptions, paradigm, life experience, et cetera, judgment, values, and transition that from subjectivity to objectivity, which is what you designed Innermetrics to do, right? You put data behind human capital, which, and it's not just, here's what's so brilliant too. It's not one, it's multiple visions of the same individual, which if we only had one look at them, that'd be kind of, I just think it's unethical to only have one lens, but I'll shut up for a minute. Go, Jay. I apologize.
No, not at all. We always talk about, like similar to medicine. Back up real quick. This is vital. I mean, if you're consulting to organizations, there's nothing that happens in the organization from sales to profitability to strategy to finance, operations. It doesn't matter. Nothing happens that's not involving something that's happening between the ears. As we like to say here, all performance is generated between the ears. Not all human performance, all organizational performance is generated between the ears. The industrial era, great. Frederick Taylor and his Taylorisms and all the scientific management principles, wonderful. You can tell everybody to do the same thing because they're picking up a stick and smacking something with it. So labor-wise, everybody could do the same thing. It's the intellectual era. It's Drucker's knowledge era. 80% of the US GDP, and similarly in other developed countries, is based on what happens with humans, service, not technology per se. It's the people that build the technology, that operate the technology, that provide services. That's here. So you got to understand where the majority of the value of the profitability of the organization is coming from. Psychometric tools, big fancy Scrabble word, personality assessments. I hate the term, it's a misnomer. It's such a huge umbrella that nothing will ever measure your entire personality. But any kind of a personality assessment is the best way to do it. There's a lot of them out there, and you can go try all of them you want. We happen to use the ones that we own because we tried a bunch of them and we built these. So we also talk about, like the Department of Labor and many other organizations talk about, Brian just mentioned it, using a multi-prong approach. You can't just look at one lens. So in other words, in medicine, you don't just want to take a pulse and go, I understand everything about this patient. We want to look at what, why, and how. And we'll dive into the how part today. What natural talents does a person have based on how they think and make decisions? That's a profile called the Attribute Index, based on the work of a Dr. Hartman, Yale and MIT, and then retired at University of Tennessee. Brilliant gentleman. We'll go into him in a couple of weeks. Why, however, are they motivated to use those talents? Very different, like an MRI, a CT, and an X-ray. Same body, totally different views and ways of looking at it. Why is the motivational piece based on Dr. Edward Spronger's work? And then how do they go about using them? Behaviorally, exhibiting the behaviors of when I've made a decision and how I've made a decision. How am I going to go out and actually do the damn thing? That's based on Dr. Marston's work from Harvard. He's got a model called DISC. So today we're diving into DISC. I'll turn it over to Brian while I pull up a sample DISC index report.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk you through real quick and show you, look, this is why it's important, example after example, of quantifying what is an intangible behind a problem. People would say all the time, hey, this guy can't do this, or he continues to do that, or she won't work this way. Why? That's the question you really got to understand if you're going to help an organization. So Brian, I'll pull this.
Well, and then before you go into showing here's what I think is so powerful. I mean, I met you 19 years ago, Jay, and it changed my life. Because, yeah, I know we're getting old, dude. That's called artificial wisdom right there, right? Wisdom. I tell my wife and my kids that, they laugh. But here's what's crazy. What happened in my journey was I realized why, because I worked for General Electric in the 90s during the Jack Welch era, where everybody got trained, man, and I had skills pounded into me and provided to me, and it was really pretty cool. But what I realized when I left General Electric and entered what I call the real world, when people stopped giving me the benefit of the doubt because I didn't have GE under my name, what happened, I realized how much I sucked and how much inadequacy I had. And as I started to go down this path of just true awareness, I started realizing, wow, so this is how I'm received. And this is why I'm not that engaged. And this is why I miss so many components in terms, because the biggest issues I ever was written up for when I worked at GE as a producer was I didn't do a good job of planning my year and my strategy for my territories that I managed. I did a horrible job with it. And so I would go to class and learn how to become better at planning. And I took the old, the Cubby planner, I'd put the green dots and the ABCs, and I would never follow the rules that I set up for myself. But here's what was so crazy was it helped me to kind of understand objectively why and who and how I was. And I think it's really important to say this, and what a lot of folks miss. We have 3 different psychologies. I know Jay said it. And here's what for convenience sake, and for convenience sake only, we have included those 3 results in a single PDF. I know Jay and I banter back and forth. Sometimes people think it's one instrument. It's not. It's actually 3 different psychologies, completely these folks never sat around and said, hey, kind of like the X-ray creators didn't sit around with the PET scan creators. PET scan measures, abnormal growth within cells at the cellular level to determine if there's some sort of cancerous type, formation going on. And X-rays measure bone density and other things. And just like that, like these different instruments, these folks that created those didn't sit around and kind of say, hey, how are you going to go about putting together this cellular mapping while I look? This is the same exact thing. And so I think it's important for us to really stress we have 3 different psychologies for convenience sake wrapped up into one PDF document. And it really helps to break down just different looks into people. So, and then as I've worked with organizations and over the last 19 years, and now as we support, over 1,000 plus consultants, it is so amazing the journeys every single individual gets to go on, because we're looking at so much data about them. The cool thing is we got tons of data. The thing that could be
we can make data all day long.
Yeah.
All day. Here's the key. If you're a consultant, you're struggling to be profitable, one of the best things that we see people do is use psychometrics, use personality assessments, use whatever. I don't care. There's a bunch of them out there. Make sure they're valid. And there are a lot of good validated ones out there. Or
we've got a nice thick manual we send out that shows that it's validated and reliable.
All of the technical manual and the statistical validations of significant correlations.
Yes.
Yeah, those things are there if you want to read them, but make sure you get them when you talk about someone else's assessment as well. The point here is use assessments. I don't care what kind you are. If you want to be profitable, use assessments. If If you want to use ours, that's even better, but we're here to tell you how to be profitable. So let's give you some examples. We talked about what, why, and how. MRI, CT, PET scan, right? Whatever, X-ray. This is the how piece. And you'll notice in our report, it actually says how, because we can make an advanced insight that shows all three. It says what, why, and how on the cover. This is Marston's DISC. I want you guys to have the rest of this time to see examples of, if you don't know anything about DISC, we'll go into it some other time. We don't have time in 20 minutes because we got to go make you some money. So here's D, I, S, and C. Dominance or decisiveness, interactiveness, stability or stabilizing, and cautiousness or conscientiousness. I say 2 for each one because it depends on which time Dr. Marston and then others who have progressed his work since to this date have titled it. But it's about different behaviors. It's about different ways of looking at things. And so if you look at this, it's problems, people, pace, procedures. How do you tend to approach problems and make decisions? How do you tend to interact with others? What's your preferred pace in your environment? Really fast, really slow? What's your preference for order and established protocols and standards? You know, are you big, meticulous, super detail-oriented or not? You can appear anywhere on these four, and they're discrete, they're independent, they're not correlated. So you can have a score that's here high and here low, and one doesn't not automatically, mathematically, or programmatically mean your score must go up. If this one goes up, this one has to go up. Any combination is possible. The reason this is important, and we'll just stop right here. I mean, there's all kinds of pages in this report that talks about strengths and weaknesses and preferred communication styles. But let's just say you're dealing with an organization and this is what it's about. This is mapping or diagnosing. We talk about the diagnostic sales process. This is diagnosing the cause of the problem. What's our mantra here, Brian? He or she who identifies the cause of the problem gets to fix it.
Earns the right to fix it.
Earns the right to fix it. So I'm looking at a profile of an individual without knowing anything about this report. Follow along. This person's a salesperson. Now, they didn't use personality assessments in their corporation when they hired. The person dressed nicely. They thought they'd like to get into sales. Their mother or father were in sales. What the hell? I can go into sales. They don't offer a degree at college for it, so anybody can get into sales. Money looks good. I'll go ahead and be a salesperson. Well, the person's not prospecting. The person rather would sit around for the first 3 months. The complaints coming from management were tons of questions, insecurity, and going out and actually starting to cold call, going to clients, preferences to go to existing clients instead of out to brand new ones. You know, and management's like, they're fearful, they're afraid to get out of their comfort zone. You know, they're just not listening, they're lazy. You know, you start to see observable behaviors without knowing. You start to just throw things at it. I love the medical analogy because people used to go, oh, they're sneezing. They have demons inside them. Gesundheit, God bless you, which means thank goodness. The demons are out of your body now.
Right.
Without knowing what's going on inside, people come up with all kinds of crazy ideas. And just because it's 2019 doesn't make it any different. They're making all kinds of assumptions that this person's not selling because they observe the behavior, and this must be the reason why. And ask 10 managers and you get 11 opinions.
Well, and let's make sure we point out too, just because we have this one instrument, a lot of what Jay just described when we visited with this client, and the client said, they're fearful, they don't have the confidence, they're asking lots of questions, right? What's interesting is the DISC isn't going to answer any of those things. All it's going to tell us is just, yeah, it's going to tell us observably what is their tendency for how they approach their environment. And this allows us to have some indicators as to how to compare how the position is going to want the person to behave in order to be successful. And then this instrument sits there and says, this is their tendency for how they're going to behave. And from a diagnostic objective, no opinion, no anything else, we can just simply go, so if the position is required to behave this way, and their tendency is that they behave this way, it's just, I think it's a piece that we point out, because other parts of the instrument can let us go in with acute accuracy and kind of go, oh, here's a couple of things. This gives us some accuracy, but it's still pretty broad stroke, but I think it'll afford us conversation.
They all are. I mean, we're talking about behaviors, mapping behaviors. So taking all of those opinions from those different managers and actually having something objective.
Boom, objectivity.
Intangibles. Now we're making them tangible. So the person happens to be in a sales role that requires a lot of outbound prospecting, cold calling, aggressive prospecting, hunting, gathering. That's a behavior that requires a lot of quick, decisive, just go, action. That action normally is seen somewhere up in the 90 level on a D. Dominance, decisiveness, aggressiveness, action, those kind of mentalities. They also tend to be somebody that maybe is a higher I. They're fine with walking up to strangers. This is a 46 on a 0 to 100 scale. That behavior normally requires a very large extrovert. This is just in the midline, so they can act like an extrovert, but they're not super, super high I. So normally, let's say that's the kind of job we would normally see somebody up here. And we've looked at millions of them, and I do mean millions. So we know that it's pretty consistently going to be a score that's in this high I, high D area that supports that action, those tasks at work. It oftentimes is supported by a much lower C, because that individual doesn't have time to study every page in the manual and become a PhD in the sales manual. Those individuals are, the 99 Cs. If there's 10 questions, they want 11 answers. They want every possible answer before they squeeze the trigger. Now, this is great if you're a nuclear engineer on a Navy submarine, orthopedic brain surgeon or orthopedic. I don't want somebody just kind of going, we'll figure it out in those roles. But in sales, outside sales, oftentimes you've got to let go of the details. You got to jump when you only have 4 of 10 questions answered. You got to move quickly. You got to adapt. You got to be flexible, because you never know what's going to happen. So that's an example of where we see somebody that says, this individual's not doing this. And here's why we think why. Well, we want to be able to go in and say, here's how we know why. We know that this individual. Let's look at another example. Brian,
well, let's stay on that for 1 second here, Jay. So let's say a lot of our consultants now are starting to get invited to work in information technology and operations, because these teams have grown exponentially. Sometimes we talk about sales, and sales is, in terms of headcount, is such a small percentage of the total population of an organization. And these operations and IT folks tend to be very significantly large, even in educational settings as well. But what happens when, this case and scenario, let's say this person is in a leadership role that is now tasked with leading other leaders that are in disciplines that are not in their bailiwick. Maybe they come up through being a coder, and now they're managing the app developers, and they're also managing, emerging leader, and they're managing now and leading R&D. And so what we'll see is they'll say, gosh, this person is becoming a little bit more, constrained, because they don't lead the teams as effectively. And so we get this data back, and we go, okay, this data set lends itself to saying, I would like to have a lot of the procedures and plans laid out so I can follow them. And because they don't have them, they may not feel as willing to engage and to embrace it, because there isn't a plan on how a coder leads an app developer, or how a coder leads,
or let's say it's sales. Let's say they're selling, it's 90% maintenance, right? It's a very small percentage of new growth. The company already has 85% market share. Yeah. They're selling, diagnostic equipment inside laboratories that PhDs use. And so they're dealing with PhDs and biologists and chemists all day long. That's their job, is to go in and help make sure that 85% of them are already customers. So it's a sales job. I hate the term sales the way companies throw it out, because they do. They go, they're in sales. There are a million different sales jobs out there, and they're so far apart.
Here we go, Jerry. I'm making up a term right now. Persuasive collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, we see people all the time. I need a salesperson. What do you sell versus what do they sell? I mean, It's so huge. I told you we were working with that one cellular company. They got a division to go sell to governments, right?
Right.
State and local governments and federal. They pulled from their retail sales department, cellular phones. They pulled from their retail department regionally around the country and said, you're our best. Now you're going to be in the government sales. Okay, well, they're sales. You should be able to do the same damn thing. It's not. It's like education or medicine or law. There's drastically different pieces. So this may actually be a good fit if we understand that that's what they're doing. So you look at this and go, I would never hire this person for sales. Well, if it's not sales per se, but it's support and maintenance And you have to have somebody who's willing to go toe to toe with a PhD who has 3 of them, who all they want to do is talk about super granular, super detail oriented. This may be a good fit. I think the key is getting the data in a way that's understandable too. So, you know, we walk through the report real quick in the seconds we've got left here. We pull bullets out that help you understand what this means. You know, so it's not just looking at bars. All of these bullets are unique to this set of scores. So you can go through here and understand, you know, what are the natural tendencies of this person? They're going to become bored with routine work. All right, there you go. 20 minutes, what do we say?
You know what? It's time to get out there and go sell some shit.
Go sell some shit. Later.